Hey everyone, we've gone over we've read the second part of 6 Degrees of Separation, and since you've done the discussion questions, I'm going to go over them just a little bit. Um, in this section, we get a little more of uh, the interaction between Paul and Wisa and Flan, and it's a little more revealing through a couple of monologues and dream sequences and things like that. So let's kind of dive right in. Um, First question was on page 44. That is, of course, of my copy. I don't know if you have the same one, but on page 44, what do the lines, there is a God and his name is Joffrey, Sidney mean? Does this exchange seem odd that these characters were mentioned and not others? So I wanted to go into that a little bit, and I'll go to my page 44. The whole question, this is Flan's line. For a while, we almost lost it. If I didn't get this money, Wisa, I would have lost the Cezanne. It would have gone. I had nowhere to get it. Wisa, why don't you tell me how much these things mean? You wait until the last minute. Flan, I don't want to worry you. Wisa, not worry me. I'm your partner. They embrace, and then Flan has the line, there is a God. Wisa says, and his name is. Flan says, Jeffrey. Wisa says, Sidney. Um, and of course, the last part of your discussion questions. Does this exchange seem odd that these characters were mentioned and not others? Um, Again, you'd almost think that, Paul would be thanked, at least thanked, but maybe not identified as God. I mean, it's interesting that, what is it? Jeffrey and Sidney are both identified as who they should be thanking and who they uh, almost consider in this very moment as their kind of God, if you will. Um, Couple things. This is really indicative of um, essentially Flan and Wisa's values. Um, as you kind of heard from the stuff that I read in the very beginning of that passage, it does seem like Flan was almost in a dire situation financially. So uh, uh, when he says, there is a God and his name is, that's why Flan uh, says, God's name is Joffrey. He's the one that bailed them out with this art deal. So he's giving his thanks to essentially the money. Um, Wisa, on the other hand, says Sidney, that is Sidney Poitier. And so you've got uh, Flan thanking God for the money, epitomized by Jeffrey in this deal. And Wisa uh, thanks Sidney, which of course we know through essentially Paul. Um, and, Sidney Poitier, the movie star, the director, Paul says that he's going to make cats and put Flan and Wisa in him or in it. And so Flan is thanking the money. Wisa is essentially uh, thanking celebrity, thanking connections, thanking um, almost status, if you will, um, connecting themselves to someone like Sidney Poitier. Um, so that's why, well, it's telling for each of them. That's why those lines are in there. Second one, um, on page 45, what is being said about life in the Paul Sidney monologue? What does it mean that Paul appears as Sidney Poitier? This is, I will kind of read this. Wisa is, well, at first talking to the audience here. I dreamt of Sidney Poitier, his rise to acclaim. I dreamt that Sidney Poitier sat at the edge of my bed and I asked him what troubled him. Sidney, what troubles you? Is it right to make a movie about cats? Um, and if you've ever read a novel or anything in your English class, you know that monologues aren't just, casual, random conversations. They mean something else. So Paul, essentially being Sidney in this I dreamt of Sidney scene, Sidney says, I'll tell you why I have to make a movie of cats. I know what cats is, Louisa. May I call you Louisa? I have no illusions about the merits of cats, but the world has been too heavy with all the right to lifers, protect the lives of the unborn, constitutional amendments, marches, when does life begin, or the converse, the end of life, the right to die. Why is life at this point in the 20th century so focused on the very beginning of life and the very end of life? What about the 80 years we have to live in between those two inexorable bookends? So, as I said, there's something there, um, something there both for Paul and for Wisa. So the trick is, what is that? We don't have a whole lot of the picture yet, but we certainly will. Um, I don't want to give too much of it away either. Um, First of all, the what does it mean that Paul appears as Sidney Poitier? That's at the very least, that's the connection. That may even be she thinks of both of these people as kind of one and the same, which can kind of be interesting and interpreted in a couple of different ways. Um, but what is being said about life in the Paul Sidney monologue? He kind of the end of it basically talks about uh, our lives, right? We know we're born and we know we're going to die. And so what this monologue does is it gets us to focus and for us, the audience, to think about our lives. What should a life be? How it should be defined? What we should do with our lives? Things like that. Um, that's as probably as accurate but vague as I can get without being too spoilery. Um, you might have more specific interpretation of that um, based on other clues in other chapters, and you'll probably see more and more as we read through how uh, that monologue about life will be meaningful. So, number 3 on page 46. Uh, what does the line secret? I don't have any secret. I just know when to take the drawings away from them mean. So this is Flann talking to, let's see, I'm trying to, and it's on the previous page. Oh, this is Flann talking about his dream in a conversation with, I think it was, what, second grade teacher? Well, I don't know. That's a detail. Don't need it. He's talking to his kid's teacher, talking about paintings. Um, let's see. What had got me into this, and I thought, dreamed, remembered how easy it is for a painter to lose a painting. He can paint and work on a canvas for months, and one day he loses it. Just loses the structure, loses the sense of it. You lose the painting. Um, let's see here. When the kids were little, we went to parents' meeting at their school, and I asked the teacher why all her students were geniuses in the second grade. Look at the first grade, blotches of green and black. Look at the third grade, camouflage. But the second grade, your grade, Matisse's, every one. You've made my child a Matisse. Let me study with you. Let me into second grade. What's your secret? And this is what she said. Secret? I don't have any secret. I just know when to take their drawings away from them. So, again, as I said before, this isn't just some random conversation that Flan has with a teacher. There is a deeper meaning here, a meaning for other characters and the rest of the story. Um, we'll just say that at some point, somebody will lose structure, somebody will lose, what was it? Um, loses the sense of it, and you lose the painting. Um, at some point, there is this kind of artistry that's going on in the book, and um, I use that as a pun. Um, and at some point, somebody's going to lose it, lose the structure of this art, and lose uh, sense of it, and it's going to kind of become camouflage. Something will become camouflage. Um, and it will be kind of indistinct, and it won't be good anymore. And yeah, it's basically foreshadowing. It's kind of telling you what's going to happen in the future of the plot. Again, you may have an idea as to what's going to happen, what may unravel, what may be lost, even. Um, but for now, that's the accuracy. That's the kind of prediction that I want you to have in your head as I give you some of these readings and as you go through these. So that's number 3. Number 4, we get into something a little more uh, defined, I guess. In your interpretation, how do the Kittredges and later Dr. Fine view African Americans at this time? It's not well. Now, granted, this is set and written in the 80s. So a lot of times it's not just views on race, but views on status and economic status, things like that. All of that kind of comes into play. Uh, there's definitely certain assumptions that happen. There's definitely certain ideas. And when Dr. Fine kind of blows up, you'll see exactly what those assumptions and those ideas are quite starkly. Um, so yeah, just know that it's they don't look at kind of African Americans just generally not very well. They don't look at them as necessarily equals, things like that. Um, Equal in terms of social status and maybe ability, maybe uh, intelligence, things like that. All right, and then we've got this kind of weird thing. I'm going to go backwards a little bit. Still in the same reading assignment. Define imagination as it is used in the book. See pages 33 and 34 for reference. Does the book's definition seem like something else other than imagination? Um, this is kind of interesting too. This is another one of those things that's really telling. Um, let's see. Yeah, why not? I can go through the whole thing. The extraordinary last lines of Waiting for Godot. Let's go. Yes, let's go. The stage directions, they do not move. Um, but the aura around this book of Salinger's, Catcher in the Rye, which you'll be reading a little bit later, which perhaps should be read by everyone but young men, is this. It mirrors like a funhouse mirror and amplifies like a distorted speaker one of great tragedies of our time, the death of imagination. Because what else is paralysis? The imagination has been so debased that imagination, being imaginative, rather than being the linchpin of our existence, now stands as a synonym for something outside ourselves, like science fiction or some new use for tangerine slices on raw pork chops. What an imaginative summer recipe. And Star Wars, so imaginative. And Star Trek, so imaginative. And Lord of the Rings, all those dwarves, so imaginative. The imagination is moved out of the realm of being our link, our most personal link with our inner lives and the world outside that world, this world we share. What is schizophrenia but a horrifying state where what's in here doesn't match up with what's out there? Why has imagination become a synonym for style? I believe the imagination is the passport we create to take us into the real world. Now, again, I can answer this, but I'd have to do it kind of vaguely. There are much more detailed answers with these, but I don't want to give too much details as those would be spoilers. So imagination here, uh, even if I say that, it'll be a bit of a spoiler as to what it implies. But it almost seems like imagination, as Paul uses it, um, as almost a coping mechanism, let's say. Um, he talks about the inner world versus the outer world and how the imagination is kind of the bridge to that. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of all I'll say at this point. um, uh, it shouldn't be a surprise at this point that there is some inner kind of conflict that the character is experiencing, that is Paul specifically, and that uh, the outside world doesn't quite match it, and so he's using imagination as this coping mechanism of how to kind of bridge those two, the inner world and the outer world, and kind of bring those two a bit closer together. Um, what the inner and outer stuff is will be in later chapters and later readings. So I will leave it at that. I will end the discussion here. Hopefully, these are uh, helping with the interpretation and analysis of this. And yeah, we'll all will become much clearer later on. And so I will see you later on in the book, and I'll see you online.